Hello, my name is Aviva, and today I'm going to share with you all of the books that I've read since the beginning of January. So I have 12 books to share with you today, and I feel like the majority of them went really well. I did have a couple of duds and ones that I didn't absolutely love, but I feel like for the most part, I had a pretty good beginning of the year when it comes to books. First up, I did read Voyeur by Fiona Cole. So this is the first book in a companion series. And in this book, you're following this girl who is just starting off college and she really needs money for tuition. So she ends up getting this job at this sex club called Voyeur, where people can come in and anonymously request for her to do sexual things behind a one-way mirror, and then they could watch her and stuff like that. And basically she starts off at this job, and this guy that is a part of the club starts to come in, starts to watch her, starts to kind of get like interested in her. And then it's finally the first day of classes, and this girl ends up walking into class, and who do you know is her teacher? This guy that has been coming into the club that has been anonymously watching her. So he realizes who she is, and then she doesn't realize who he is, and then the story kind of goes from there, and they're gonna end up having this forbidden age gap romance. So I really enjoyed this book. I didn't really have anything to complain about it. I thought that the tension in this book was really good. I really liked all of the aspects of it. I wasn't sure how I was gonna feel about the whole like sex club thing, but at the end of the day, it really worked for me. The thing is that I don't think I'm going to continue on with this series because I do know what the rest of the series is about, all the other books and relationships that you're gonna follow, and there is a little bit of cheating involved in some of the later books, and I don't really like reading about cheating, so I've decided to just consider this book a standalone and like cut my losses here. So I really enjoyed this book, but I don't think I will ever read the rest of the series. Next, I read Hooked by Emily McIntyre, which I really enjoyed. So this is a dark and twisted Peter Pan retelling. There's no fantasy in it, but it kind of just has like a dark vibe going on. Peter is basically a really rich but really corrupt businessman, and he used to work with Hook's parents until he murdered them one day, and Hook is basically now an adult and out to get revenge on Peter. So he basically starts to seduce Wendy, who is Peter's daughter, to try and, get back at him, as well as like doing a bunch of other stuff. And basically it's going to be the romance between Hook and Wendy. So it was really good. And the thing is that I heard a lot of mixed reviews about this book before I picked it up, and therefore I wasn't really sure what to expect from it. But then once I read it, I was like blown away. I'm like, this is so much better than I thought it was going to be, mostly because I ended up going in with low expectations. So the thing is that I'm a huge fan of Peter Pan. It's one of my favorite like fairy tales of all time, and therefore I thoroughly enjoyed all of the like things that was taken from the original story and put into this. Like there was pixie dust that was really a drug that Hook and Peter was selling. It was like Coke, but they called it pixie dust. And like the whole thing with the clock, how like Hook hates clocks, like that definitely came into this book, and all of the characters was in this book. Like we saw Tinkerbell, who was like Peter Pan's personal assistant, and everything about it was just so cute. And then you put that dark and twisted romance thing going on in it, and it just, I don't know, this one, it worked for me. After that, I read Playing with Fire by L.J. Shen, which I really enjoyed, but I didn't love it as much as the first two books that I read this year. This is basically about this burn victim. This girl, she used to be really beautiful, and then one day she was in a fire, and now she has burns and scars all over her body, and she is extremely self-conscious about it. And now she is in college, and she's also working at this food truck, and one day one of the really popular guys in her college walks up to the food truck and basically wants a job. So he's gonna end up working with her in this tiny food truck, and basically they're slowly going to become friends. Also, this guy is kind of keeping a lot of secrets. He has a lot of stuff going on as well, and he's an underground fighter. He's kind of like a bad boy sort of thing. He rides a motorcycle, all of that sort of stuff. And they somehow just form this unlikely friendship, and at the same time they're kind of like growing feelings for each other, and they just, I don't know, they worked really well together. And then once their relationship started to form, you kind of saw that like they kind of popped out of their shells of like everything that they were dealing with, like her burns and all of the secrets he was keeping. Like they kind of just like, I don't know, they bloomed into the people that they used to be before all this like crap happened to them, and it was really nice to see that. I also really liked how the guy fell first in this book. I really love seeing that also, and overall I thought that this was a great read. At the end though, there was one of those like, I'm going to hurt you or break up with you because I really love you sort of moments. Like that was the catalyst of the story before, you got that happily ever after. And I'm not a fan of that, but I will say that it did work well in this book. But besides for that, overall, it was a great read. I do have like good feelings towards it, but for some reason, I didn't give it like a 5 stars. I gave it a 4 stars, maybe like a 4.5 sort of thing. Also, if you've read November 9 by Colleen Hoover and you really enjoyed that book, then I highly recommend reading this one because honestly, it gave off similar vibes. After that, I read The Stopover by Teal Swan. So this is the first book in a companion series, the Miles High companion series. And it's also the first book that I ever read by this author. And honestly, when I got it in the mail, I was surprised by how thick it was, but it didn't end up bothering me when I was reading it. I liked how large it was, if that makes sense. This is basically about these two people who meet on a flight and end up having a one-night stand when their flight takes an unexpected stopover because of weather sort of thing. And they have a great night together, and then they don't exchange numbers or names or anything like that. And now it is a year later, and this girl got a new job, and who do you know is the CEO of the company that she just got a new job at, the guy that she had a one-night stand with a year ago. So once they realize who each other are and that they're in the same proximity, then they start to have this sort of relationship thing going on. And throughout this book, there was a lot of ups and downs. It's very workplace environment-y, very I'm the boss, I'm arrogant, good looking, everything like that, and I have my eyes on you, and therefore you are going to be with me no matter what you want to do. And I really liked that. The only issue I really had with this book was the ending. Everything just, it went downhill in a way that I didn't really enjoy. I remember like skimming the end of it a little bit because I don't know, I wasn't down for it so much. But I will say that on its way back up to its happily ever after, Jameson, the main guy in this book, did do a lot of groveling, which I thoroughly enjoyed. I really like when the guy basically like gets on his hands and knees and begs for her back sort of vibes. And we definitely had that in this book. So I did enjoy this book. I think I gave it like a 3.75 at the time. Like it was really good, but it wasn't anything special. Like I doubt I would read it again, but I do think I will continue on with the series because I do know who the second book is about. And honestly, I'd be down to check out his story. And also I have heard that this series does get better as you get later and later into it. So it's up in the air for now, but I'll probably continue with the series. Next, I read From Lukov with Love by Mariana Zapata, which might end up being one of my favorite reads from the year. I absolutely loved this book wholeheartedly, every single thing about it. This is probably going to be my favorite read of all time from Mariana Zapata. Like, I don't think anything is going to top this one for me. So in this book, you're following two professional figure skaters, and they have always been around each other their whole career, and they have never gotten along. And then one day they are basically paired up with each other to now, skate together. And now they're going to have to work with each other, and they seriously can't be in the same room together. Like, they can't talk to each other without bickering. And it really makes for a really good beginning of a relationship. Like, it is basically like an enemies to lovers forced proximity sort of vibe. So I don't know, I really loved everything about it. I will admit that the first 100 pages or so kind of was slow for me. Like, this is a slow burn romance. Like, it's gonna take forever until they actually confess feelings for each other. But the first 100 pages in themselves felt very slow to me. Like, it took 100 pages for them to finally start to work together. But take that out of the picture and this book was awesome. I loved how often both of them were interacting. Like, sometimes with Mariana Zapata books, it's a little bit too, like, the two main characters aren't even together. But in this book, they were together the whole time. There was always interactions. There were so many amazing scenes in this book. There was like a take care of me, a sick moment. There was a lot of breakdown. Just like, I don't know, there was so much good stuff in this book that I seriously cannot recommend it more. If you've never read something from Mariana Zapata and you want to give her a shot, give this one a shot first, because I really don't think you're going to be disappointed unless you can't stand the slow burn. If you can't stand the slow burn, you probably won't make it through this book. But if you're willing to be patient and give it a shot, I'm telling you, it's going to be worth it. So after reading my favorite book from this stack, I unfortunately picked up my least favorite book from this stack, which will probably also end up being one of my least favorite books from this year. And that book is Priest by Sierra Simone. So this is a very steamy romance about a priest and a girl who have a lot of sex all over a church. And I'm not going to really tell you what I hated about it and exactly what this book is about, because I actually did an entire spoiler-free review about this book. So if you wanted to hear trigger warnings from this book, what this book is really about, what to expect from it, and then what I really hated about it, then I'm just going to recommend that you check out the link in the description below and watch my 8-minute video of me rambling about everything that I absolutely hated about this book. After that, thankfully, I did pick up another book that I ended up absolutely loving, which was Under Lock by Mariana Zapata. So I was kind of like in her mood at the moment. Like, I'm like, her books have never really disappointed me yet. So let's not put me in a slump and let's pick up something good. So I picked up Under Lock, which is a motorcycle club romance, which is also a slow burn. It's basically about this girl who really needed a job. So she ends up getting a job as a receptionist at this guy's tattoo shop. And this guy is basically fully tatted. He's really rugged, really good looking, all of that sort of stuff that you would just imagine like a motorcycle tattooed up guy to be like. And he's part of a motorcycle club. And this story is just about their relationship. There's forced proximity because they're working together. And originally he is like a really big grump. He's kind of an asshole and he's really not nice to her. And then obviously he's slowly going to start, trying to protect her, getting obsessed over her, like very possessive. You are mine vibes, and I really liked it. There was a lot of interactions between both of these characters, which made the slow burn fine for me. And I think that the only thing I really had to complain about for this book was that it was one of her older works, and therefore I did stumble upon a lot of problems with the writing. Like sometimes I had to read a sentence like 3 times because it didn't flow very well for me. But the story in itself was really awesome. So overall, I thoroughly enjoyed this book. I will also point out that I wasn't the hugest fan of the main girl in this book. I thought that she did a lot of very childish moves. Like she did some stuff that was just really stupid. And I was like, why did you do that? Like, come on, you knew it was stupid in the moment and you did it anyway. And therefore, she didn't click with me so much, but I didn't hate her enough to actually hate this book. And at the end of the day, Dex, the main guy in this book, was so freaking awesome that it made up for everything wrong with this book. So overall, I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was on the steamier side of the books that I read by Mariana Zapata, and it was less of a slow burn than I was expecting from a Mariana Zapata book, and I mean that in a really positive way. After that, I ended up reading Teardrop Shot by Tijan, which is a sports romance about this pro basketball player who goes to a preseason training camp and ends up becoming friends with one of the girls that are on staff there that happens to be kind of obsessed with basketball, and this is one of her favorite players. So it has a very funky dynamic in a really good way. Like the girl is very quirky and she's kind of obsessed with basketball, specifically this pro player, and then they end up becoming friends, and then he ends up getting very protective of her, and then they're going to slowly form a relationship sort of thing. And honestly, I liked the romance in this book because both of them had a lot of baggage that they were dealing with. They were both closed off. They weren't really talkative about what was going on with them to other people in their lives. But then once they formed a friendship, they started opening up to each other, and they realized that they had a lot in common, and then that kind of formed their feelings for each other and their relationship. And I thoroughly enjoyed that aspect of this book. My issue with this book was everything else that was going on with the story. So first up, it was very history heavy in the sense of you jumped into this book and you got so much background information about where this girl was in her life and everything that happened in her past. I honestly felt that this was a part 2 to a story, but it wasn't. This is a standalone, but the whole time I was reading it, I felt like they had to remind me of something that happened in a previous book, if that makes sense. And because of that, it really bothered me. There were so many side characters going on in this story, and it was very heavy on all of the other things going on. There was so many side things happening, and I just thought that it took away from the relationship of these two characters a lot, and therefore I was bothered by it. I also didn't really like the ending of this book a little bit. I mean, I liked the happily ever after moment, but I didn't like the whole, like, you know, catalyst of the story, like how everything blew up before they got back together. Like the whole reasoning behind that and how it all, like, you know, played out, I wasn't a fan of. So there were a couple of stuff that I really didn't like about this book in general, but overall it was a solid read. I liked the relationship. I have good feelings toward this book, but there was just a lot of issues that I had with it also. I feel like this book could have had a bit of simplification, if that makes sense. Like it should have gone through another round of editing and taken out some subplots. And if that would have happened, I think that this book would have been absolutely amazing. But because it did have all of that, you know, congested things happening, I couldn't give this book higher than a 3.5, maybe 3.75. After that, I did a reread of one of my favorite books from last year, which was Vicious by L.J. Shen. So this is the first book in the Sinner of Saints companion series, and this is a bully romance, and I absolutely loved this book the first time that I read it. It was one of the first dark romances that I ever read, and it kind of is one of the reasons why I went down the path of starting to read dark romances. I was just absolutely obsessed with this book and the entire series. The thing is that because it was one of the first books that I ever read in this subgenre of sorts, I wasn't sure if it would live up to the expectations that I put on it now that I've read so many other dark and steamy romances. And then when I did the reread of it, I was very pleasantly surprised. I thoroughly enjoyed this reread, and I am very happy that I did it. I love this book, and I'm so happy to know that it really was as good as I remember it being. Next, I read Juniper Hill by Devney Perry, which is her newest release. This is the second book in the Eden series, and I actually read Indigo Ridge, which was the first book in this series, at the end of December, and I loved it so much that Devney Perry was actually so kindly enough to send me a copy of this new release. And the second that it arrived in the mail, I literally ripped open the packaging and I started reading it because that is how excited I was to read it, and thankfully I was not disappointed. So in this book, you are following this girl who just had a baby, and she basically moves across the country for a new job. She was from New York, and she takes her 2-week-old newborn and moves to Quincy, Montana to work as a housekeeper at the Eloise Hotel, which is owned by Knox's family, who is the main guy in the story. So he is a chef at this hotel, and he also is her new landlord because she couldn't find any place to rent at the moment because it's a tiny town and there's not much available. So she ends up renting his loft at his house. And basically, you know, they're going to be in each other's faces a lot because she's living on his property. She's also working at the place that he works at, and he basically gets very invested in her and her baby's life, and they're going to form a relationship, and it was very adorable. Devney Perry writes really small town, like heartwarming books that are just, you know, they're gonna put a smile on your face. They're really easy to read. They're kind of like comfort reads sort of vibes, and I thoroughly enjoyed this book. I will admit though that I did like Indigo Ridge a little bit more because there was a little bit more angst and tension when it came to the romance in that book, but this book was really sweet. Like I liked the development of their relationship, but for some reason I felt like it was kind of missing a little bit of angst and tension. Even though it was kind of there, I just didn't feel it as much as Indigo Ridge, and therefore while I loved both books, I did like Indigo Ridge a little bit more. And the last books that I'm going to share with you today is The House of Hades and The Blood of Olympus. So this is the 4th and 5th book in the Heroes of Olympus series by Rick Riordan. So this is the second Percy Jackson series. And I read the first 3 books, I don't know, throughout December. And anyway, I finally finished up with the series. So I was actually reading these through audiobook, and I thoroughly enjoyed doing it through that format. You're following a lot of people in these books, it's multiple perspectives. And usually I'm not the hugest fan of that, but because I was listening to it through audio, it kind of just worked well for me that way. So I thoroughly enjoyed this series from beginning to end, but I will admit that I think I liked the first 3 books more than the last 2 books. I kind of don't even remember so much of what happened in these 2 books, but I do remember a lot of what happened in the first 3 books. And that happens to me often with audiobooks because I'm listening to it and sometimes I space out a bit, and then all all of a sudden I'm like, wait, what just happened? But in general, I did thoroughly enjoy this series, and I absolutely loved the ending. Like the ending of The Blood of Olympus, like when we were saying goodbye to each and every character and we were seeing like their last chapter and moments sort of thing, my heart literally was like cracking from happiness because it was all so adorable. I absolutely loved where everyone like ended up and the potential for where they're going to go next possibly and wherever. So I wanted to tell you guys that I did finish up with this series. I did thoroughly enjoy it, but I'm pretty sure that my favorite book from this 5-book series is The Mark of Athena, and then backing that up with The Son of Neptune and The Lost Hero. But in general, the whole series was pretty solid. But anyway, that is everything that I had to share with you for all of the books that I read in the beginning of January. So I'm curious to know how many books you read so far this month, or, you know, you could give me exactly what you read. Tell me if anything was worth it. I love getting good recommendations. So if you have found a new amazing book, then please let me know down below because I would love to check it out. But anyway, if you enjoyed watching this video, then please give it a thumbs up. If you're not currently subscribed to my channel, please hit that subscribe button. And anyway, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, enjoy reading.